などいない戦いに疲れ果て星空を見上げる泣くことも叶わない I don't need 昨日などいらない I don't
Hello, welcome to Maison Otaku. Come in, have a seat.
I'm Justin.
And I'm Mike.
And we've got such a good episode for you today that we're really going to blitz through the opening and just jump right in.
Yeah, I know you're all so disappointed.
Yeah, because you look forward to that portion of the episode where we ramble about things that aren't really relevant, and then we get to the point that we're really trying to make.
Yes.
But no, this week, we're to the point.
Yes, probably.
Probably.
Yeah, with the exception of, just want to go over some new acquisitions lately. First, very briefly, I acquired from my buddy a couple of factory-sealed copies of Cowboy Bebop Remix. Despite the name, it's really just Cowboy Bebop, but in surround sound now, but still cool.
Yeah, and the Yoko Kanno soundtrack actually does sound better in surround sound.
Yes! Then did a Kickstarter recently for the Ninja High School version 2 textbook, which came with this really nice art book entitled Paper Dreams, The Collected Works of Ben Dunn. Also came with like a pin and some full color prints. So this is a really nice thing if you're into, you know, Ben Dunn and Amerimanga, stuff like that.
Yeah, and this is actually one of the few times where we will specifically endorse Amerimanga. Unlike what Tokyo Pop did.
Well, that whole generation of that crap doesn't count.
Right.
Anyway, then I got me this. Now, I know most of you don't give a crap, but for those of you who are following this stuff, these are amiibos. It's Nintendo Skylanders, essentially. The reason this one's cool, even though it's, you know, Wii Fit Trainer, this is one of the 3 that are actually kind of rare. And it just got even more rare because recently this, along with the other 2, got discontinued. So
it's also rather strange. This is quite possibly the least sexy girl in leggings action figure released out of Japan in the past 30 years.
Probably.
And if you don't believe me, spend some time on HLJ.
Oh, jeez.
But anyway, we have an awesome topic today. The topic is one that's very near and dear to both Mike and I. We've been really wrenching on it. So stay tuned because we're going to talk design.
So for today's topic, we're going to be talking about character design throughout the different ages. Something that's really interesting to note if you really pay attention to it. Actually, what sparked our idea for this was an article. Was that Kotaku put that up, I think?
Yeah, Kotaku threw up this image that was found on a Japanese forum that was comparing 1990s to the 2000s. And as you can see right here,
yeah,
it's a fairly straightforward comparison of just some of the little variations of common themes in the design.
However, we also took a look at that and thought, well, that barely scrapes the surface.
And because we're very interested in just continually digging a hole over here, we thought, well, let's really go age by age.
Yep. So we're going to start with, now these are not official titles, this is just what I and occasionally Justin call these things. So we'll start with what I dubbed the Bronze Age, which was the 50s and 60s. Gonna just skip over the 1918 to World War II era, the proto-anime, but...
Yeah.
So jump into anime as recognizable.
Yes. And we start with, really, like Mike said, the Bronze Age of the 50s, the 60s, Toei and Tatsunoko being the big guns, really. And we're not going to talk very much about character design in this period because anime as a thing was still so experimental that the real marvel was that it was happening at all, rather than it being an established part of the entertainment medium. You get a really interesting sense then that just copying what worked, which was predominantly Tezuka and Nishinomori, was what was going to fly.
Yeah, and that's literally what you had. You had Tezuka, You had Ishinomori, and all the guys copying Tezuka and Ishinomori.
Design-wise, that's still quite interesting.
Yeah, we're not saying that's necessarily a bad thing.
No. And quite frankly, some of the best works as of late have gone back to the Tezuka and Ishinomori wells.
Mm-hmm.
But from an artistic design standpoint, from an individuality standpoint, it's not a particularly fascinating era.
Yeah, it's all a bit samey.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna jump right to the 70s to get started.
And the 70s are really, really fascinating because at this point, anime is a fixture on television, it's a fixture in film, and you have a much broader amount of creators and of printed material for those creators to draw from.
Mm-hmm.
So you start getting all of these really now iconic designs showing up. Monkey Punch, Matsumoto, Mori Ishinomori.
Yeah, Mori Ishinomori, of course we can't forget the big one, Go Nagai.
Go Nagai is completely impossible to ignore.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not familiar with great character designer, mangaka, and noted crazy person Go Nagai, we will have an episode on him upcoming.
But Go Nagai is the 70s.
He is.
Yeah.
And his influence is still shaking the foundations.
Yep. And a funny thing about that decade, we were originally going to do this episode a bit differently of, okay, good examples and bad examples of both eras. We ran into the problem. We're like, okay, so here are some great examples of 70s character designs. We realized we can't really disagree with much of anything that was done in the 70s in terms of character design, aside from some minor nitpicks.
Right. And while we enjoy nitpicking between ourselves, it's not particularly informative for you. So instead, what we want to say were the real glories of the 70s was with color now being a big part of the palette, with the freedom of storytelling, because a lot of the current genres weren't established.
Well, yeah, it's kind of, I forget who was being interviewed, but, a big name in classic rock, commenting, back in the heyday of all that. It's like, yeah, we didn't know what we were doing, but the crazy thing was the producers didn't know that we didn't know what we were doing, and it's a bit of that. It's just the creators just ran wild with whatever, and they're like, okay, print that shit.
Yes. When nobody has come to you saying, okay, we need a real mecha series, we need a harem series, we needed this, we needed that, because it hasn't been invented yet, anything can happen.
Mm-hmm.
So you had Lupin the Third, you had Gatchaman, you had Casshan Robot Hunter.
Every classic Tatsunoko work came out of that. You had, the Go Nagai Ken Ishikawa mecha series, Mazinger Z. You had the introduction of the mecha series of the piloted mecha series. Before then it was just someone with a remote control. Mazinger Z introduced us to the concept of a robot you piloted from the inside.
Mm-hmm. And going back to how that reflected also in the character designs of the era, because nobody knew what anything was supposed to look like, it was free form. So you have the Mad Magazine influenced Monkey Punch works in Lupin. You had those very hard-edged, dark-shaded works of Go Nagai.
And the very Marvel and DC influenced works of Tatsunoko.
Yes. And of course, the evergreen languid and ladies and stoic men of Leiji Matsumoto.
Yeah. And speaking of character design, it doesn't get much more iconic than that. You look at a Matsumoto design, that's his.
And because of this, the 70s builds the vocabulary for design.
Yep.
Some of which is just impossible to escape. The bright colors, the eye shapes, the structure of bodies comes from that 70s period, and everything since then is building from there.
Which is why I lovingly refer to the 70s as the Silver Age, because it truly was.
It was the Age of Enlightenment.
Yes.
And what we then took from there, after success, after fame, after pop culture reinforcement, you can almost say, coupled with economic growth of a type not yet seen, we get the 1980s.
Yep. Which, you got... Well, the golden age more or less spans 80 to 93, in my opinion. But yeah, 80s and early 90s is... That's where it's at.
It is. And partially because there was money to throw at any project. And partially because with everything that had been done in the 70s, now there was a chance to refine it. And part of this showed in the detail focus of 1980s character designs, which also partially came from that time that a lot more production was given, since you didn't have to get something churned out for television consumption because of the introduction of the OAV, and because now there was a lot more film anime. You had time to get a couple more hash marks in there.
Yep. Well, also, this is still during that era where they realized you have to, actually work to earn your earn your keep in the animation world.
Oh, absolutely. It was a... If you ever go back and watch either the last episode of Golden Boy or Otaku no Video, it's really quite funny how accurate those pictures of the animation industry at the time are. That's how all of these works were done. Subcontractors, small studios, fly-by-night creators. Really a wild time.
Yeah, there's actually a very interesting VHS, if you ever find it, the Akira production report, I think it's called. Just shows you how crazy the making of that movie was. Like, they walk you through, like the office section, and it's just, desks stacked this high in paperwork, nothing's organized, people have gone like days without sleep. It's quite a time, and from that time, again, you have expansion of what you could do in character design. Some of the great designers of the time look absolutely nothing alike. Katsuhiro Otomo looks nothing like Kenichi Sonoda. Or anything else for that matter.
Nothing else.
Sonoda, well, anyone who worked on Bubblegum Crisis. Bubblegum Crisis is the 80s.
Absolutely. And you can hear our opinions on that several episodes back.
Yeah, episode 5, I think?
5.
Yeah.
But Bubblegum Crisis showed Kenichi Sonoda's character design work. You had the explosion of Masamune Shiro.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
You
want to talk about character designs with Shiro. I mean, Shiro, somewhat like Fujishima a bit later on, basically was someone who preferred to do character designs in and of himself. Thought, well, I'll use this as an excuse to write manga.
Yes. And that was really one of the fun things about the design of the period. There was so much freedom because there was so much money. And because there were so many different avenues for so many different creators to have their voice. Granted, it led to some Mad Bull 34s.
Yeah, we're not saying it was all good. It's just...
It was just free.
Yes.
It was truly the Wild West of the Far East.
Yes.
And what this resulted in was the 90s.
Yeah.
We're trying very hard not to run down any particular era. We're trying very hard. The 90s brought in a lot more corporate approaches.
Yeah, I'd say that's fair.
Because all of those little subcontractors and all of this Wild West approach to making animation
kind of went away once the housing bubble burst.
And furthermore, it wasn't a very good way to make television programming.
No.
It was a fantastic way to make OAVs. It was a fantastic way to make films, kind of. It was a lousy way to make television. And television came roaring back in the 90s. And television had some very different demands. Lower budgets.
To say the least.
More standardization. And
simpler art.
And you had to have something to sell right off the bat. And that led to, of course, more trope. I'm loath to use the term.
No, it's about accurate here.
Trope-laden creations. But, on the plus side, what we did get was another burst of color. Though, color palette for the 1990s just completely changed from the 1980s.
Oh, yeah.
The splashes of neon.
Yeah,
and
well, the finer, sort of gritty bits worked into, these flowing designs and all that stuff. It's now... Let's put it to you this way. I'm sure you've all seen Pokemon, old, original Pokemon. That's about the worst of what the 90s had to offer.
Yes. What some of the best the 90s had to offer were the arrival of the star designers, where being a character designer was something into itself. So you had the works of Toshihiro Kawamoto. Kawamoto did Golden Boy, Cowboy Bebop, a lot of the heavy hitters. And these were people who were able to take the constraints of that time and really wrap them up into very beautiful, very individualistic characters that were instantly memorable.
Yep.
And there were a lot of instantly memorable characters from this period of time whose designs are just as enduring, I'd like to say.
Well, even on the other end of that, some designs where, this is holy crap, blatantly mid-90s. Like, you look at Slayers. As horrendously 90s as those designs were, they're still instantly recognizable.
Oh, absolutely. And you can't throw away the design vernacular of a decade just because it's instantly dateable.
Yeah.
We can look at something and say that's 1980s. And we can look at something and say that's 1990s, which means that there was a design voice at the time.
Well, it's like we said in a previous episode. There's a big difference between something being dated and being of its time.
Yes. And there was a lot good of its time. That character designers were actually being recognized as a big part of the creative process was great. That we did finally have some standardization needed to happen so that we didn't get things like Art Mix suddenly closing down and us getting no more Bubblegum Crisis ever. That was good.
Yeah.
We won't say necessarily that everything Sunrise and AIC did in the 1990s was good. But we'll say that at least they were there to ensure that things got made to their complete length. And the stranglehold they put on creators in the 90s led to, as digital animation became more common,
Yep.
and computer programs for creating more series became more common, the creators, working under the yoke of the corporate studios, went out again.
Yeah.
And we started getting Studio Bones, Production IG, Gainax, and in the thousands, we had another burst of design.
If you want to call it that.
There were a lot of missteps.
Yeah.
There were a lot of missteps in the 2000s.
Again, we're trying to stay positive here, but
Trying to stay positive, trying to just explain what was going on.
but it's the 2000s in terms of character design was all about simplification. In
Yes.
fact, I will break the rule I just said and say, if anything, I would call it oversimplification.
A lot of that. On one hand, you had guys like Kawamoto and Range Murata doing exquisite work. And on the other hand, well, we had somebody.
Yep.
We had a guy.
Yep. A man known for only being able to draw one face.
A man who can only give a few hairstyles for individuality.
Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, we give you
Hisashi Hirai.
It's lazy. Oh, baby.
God, he sucks.
Yeah.
This is a man who effectively sank Gundam for half a decade for me. I was so unhappy.
I couldn't watch Seed. I could kind of watch Sokyu no Fafner, but even that I didn't get past the first few episodes.
I couldn't. I couldn't do it. And that's because of his simplification.
And the sad thing is, aside from the fact that he can only draw that one character, basically, his is some of the more detailed character designs, if you look at the actual detail that's in them. Although not much variation.
No.
It's like, you look at, there's a lot, in terms of simplification, there's a lot worse in the 2000s. That's the bad thing.
Oh, absolutely. When Clamp had their little bit of a rotation due to their previous lead designer's wrist problems, oh, good lord, did they decide that, okay, we can just take everything out of the character designs and have them just a stick.
Yes.
You could only get get much further from late 2000s Clamp as a stick with a ball on the end.
Yep. Well, let's not forget our good friends at Shonen Jump.
Oh boy.
Now, some of the Shonen Jump manga, different mangas that are in there look okay. I still won't say they look great, but they look okay. But dear God, the anime versions of them is just...
Yeah. But we can actually lay the blame for a lot of that as well at another big shift that happened. Remember when we said that in the 1980s we had all those little cottage subcontractor animators, who do stacks and stacks of in-between animation cells for all these different productions, and they'd be delivered in stacks to wherever they were actually collating all of this into a production. Well, they all lost their jobs in the 90s.
Yep.
And no longer existed in the 2000s. Well, with the glut of production that was being done in the 2000s by all of these startup studios, for all of these startup networks in Japan, as well as for the American market, which was booming like crazy because of the DVD boom, well, they needed some way to start producing lots of stuff cheaply.
Yep. And we have the computer to thank for that.
The computer in Korea. We need to preface this by saying that we are fully aware that there is a thriving comic scene in Korea. The Korean manhwa is a legitimate comic form.
More to the point, I'd say it's survived recent decades better than the Japanese one has.
Indeed, in a lot of instances. And we fully endorse the idea of giving Korean animators and Korean comic artists a chance to distribute their work through the rest of the world.
However,
please stop using these guys as your in-betweeners, Japan. Because what's happening is you have the artists in Japan, the key animators, taking a simplified version of the character design, slapping it together in digital animation software, then sending the key animation cells, which are no longer cells,
it's an email,
emailing them to Korea, where Korean sweatshop animators fill in the gaps, and then email the whole mess back to Japan, where it's a finished product ready to get shipped to the network.
Yeah, it's... As my cousin likes to joke, we are almost at the point where whipping up an anime character design happens at the press of a button.
Yeah. There's no directorial oversight or editing. The biggest problem to this, of course, which is also an amusing problem. If you've ever seen any of those stills of really badly drawn Naruto or One Piece where somebody's arm just suddenly disappears or their eyes are looking in completely the wrong direction or anything like that, that's a result of this process, which is actually intended to make ultra-long shonen series inexpensive enough for broad consumption, because they're not making as much money off of it as they used to, because people aren't watching television, people aren't buying things advertised on television, so advertising revenue's down, people aren't buying DVDs, So DVD sale revenue is down. And all this revenue is down means, well, we got to make it cheaper.
Yep. Of course, any logical person would mean make the series shorter by not adding 5 seasons of filler episodes, but I digress.
Yeah. Any logical person would also come to the conclusion maybe we need to create things with a little bit more universal appeal as opposed to churning out the same series year after year, but with a slightly new coat of paint in the hopes that this will be the body pillow that all these sad little freaks buy.
Congratulations, anime, you've become Madden.
Yes.
Again, we digress.
We digress.
But,
We're good at digressing.
Yep. But,
On the plus side, digital animation has given a lot of opportunity for people who are willing to take their time with it to animate niche creations in a more fluid, more detailed, more consistent style. For a lot of the shonen tripe, we're getting creations like Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex and the new Ghost in the Shell Arise.
even better than that, this is also the process that allowed Makoto Shinkai to become so big, with his debut, I guess you could call it a hit, Voices of a Distant Star. He eventually, started doing full production works and has lately began to be hailed as the new Miyazaki.
Yeah. Or for that matter, Satoshi Kon, whom we miss. We miss you, Satoshi. The ability of creators to work more freely because of the technology available to them has in some way compensated for the ability of creators to work freely because of the budget given to them. We will never again see the 1980s when pet projects like Barefoot Gen, pet projects like Robot Carnival, pet projects like Akira ran amok.
But that's a story for another episode, hint, hint.
Yeah. But we do now have a time where a lot of different creators are creating a lot of new characters using a lot of new technology that gives them the chance to at least try.
So, as you guessed from the title of the segment, we're going to present to you a sort of case study in character design. A character that's been with us for quite a few decades, and in each incarnation has received a character design revamp that is very much of its time. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to see different generations' takes on the look of the same character.
Absolutely. And we're working with Casshan, who is a classic Tatsunoko superhero. He's been with us now at this point for 41 years.
Yep.
So that's a lot of time to interpret a character a lot of different ways. And in doing the research for this, we found out that he's got a really, really good pedigree.
Yep. So, we of course start out with the original from 1973. As you can see, very typical 70s artwork. Has that, the soft broken line art, the sort of typical 70s approach to making something gritty. Like, alright, this needs to look dark and gritty. Rub a black pastel across it.
Absolutely. But the palette is very classically 70s, that really heavy color contrast. A lot of yellows, a lot of oranges, very subtle contrast and shadow. Mm-hmm. A lot of the things that make 70s artwork stand out a lot, and the design itself is more based around the color of the design than the shape of the design, mm-hmm. or the details of the design, which is very, very strong work, very straightforward work. And the strength of the work is completely believable when you find out who created it.
Yep. Tatsunoko liked to work with this man quite a bit in the 70s, did the famous designs for Gotcha Man, but this is yet another Yoshitaka Amano design.
Yes. And what's more, this is Amano acting as the filter for the founder of Tatsunoko, or one of the two brothers that founded and Tatsunoko, Tatsuo Yoshida.
Mm-hmm.
So the creator of the character, the founder of Tatsunoko Production, working with one of the all-star designers of all time, Yoshitaka Amano, creates this. And really enduring character look.
Yeah.
Very clear-cut. You cannot take anything away from this design and still have it recognizable.
Well,
as Casshan.
and it's funny because when you break it down, it's really a guy in a high-collared motorcycle outfit with a couple of guns strapped to his hips.
Right.
But it just works.
It works perfectly. Actually, it's kind of funny because video game commentator and professional prick Jim Sterling did a fantastic episode of his Jimquisition regarding Square Enix and how they've recently lost their way.
Dear God. Yeah, well, link in the description.
Yes, link in the description to that episode because it's fantastic. And it is him railing profanely at Tetsuya Nomura for being Tetsuya Nomura, which is a crime in of itself.
Hey, you're doing it wrong.
You are. You really are. Look at what Nomura is doing and has done, and even right now is doing to other characters. I don't consider this a humongously egregious thing, but he's done a redesign of Hatsune Miku, which...
Yeah, because she needed more zippers.
Yeah. Oh, and you know what it was? He said, wow, there are... she has cuffs to her shirt that don't connect in any way to her shirt. That's exactly the sort of thing that gets me up in the morning. I can work with that level of fashion that doesn't make sense.
Oh, God.
But we digress.
Again, we do a lot. But in general, getting back to our main focus, Casshan, very, very typical of 70s design work and artwork. It's that near perfect balance of realism and stylism that was really only ever surpassed in the 80s and early 90s.
Right.
Which,
And it's hard to say that it was surpassed. It was certainly built upon, but I would even argue that as far as pure design, the stylistic approach of the 70s, the clean approach of the 70s is very hard to beat, which is why so many of those designs, the basics of those designs, stick with us. Fortunately, as we now get to explain, the creators of the future from 1973 got their shot to see what they could do. And 20 years hence from Amano's original, Yasuomi Umetsu tackles Casshan and Casshan Robot Hunter.
Yeah, as we mentioned in our previous episode and our Robot Carnival episode, this guy was involved in a venture Tatsunoko was undertaking in the late 80s, early 90s, of just reinventing all their big hitter series and just making it more badass, more awesome, and generally grittier and more detailed.
Yeah.
These are gritty 90s reboots done right, if you ignore Hurricane Palomar.
Yes.
Which at least it had good animation. At least that's not all you can give it.
It's just
the writers were sipping the paint.
yeah, Casshan works for a gritty reboot.
Mm-hmm.
It's worked twice for a gritty reboot. Casshan doesn't. Yeah, Casshan works. Hurricane Palomar does not work for a gritty reboot.
Well, especially when you kind of pull a Macross Frontier halfway through, you just jump out and make it some like goofy fan servicey thing, then jump back into gritty. It's just watch it. It's terrible.
Yeah.
But anyway, yes, Casshan Robot Hunter. Now, personally, this is my favorite incarnation of this. And, again, we have the great Yasuomi Umetsu art style. That's another one where, for how staunchly realistic and how otherwise it would be unremarkable if it wasn't, if that makes any sense. It's you recognize that artwork ever. And again, as we said in our Robot Carnival episode, he did the directing and character designs for Presence. He's also famous for Kite, which I believe is his own creation.
Kite's
Mezzo Forte. And as I said, did, the Gatchaman OVA, Casshan Robot Hunter.
Umetsu's trademark is that inflated realism. And when applied to Casshan stylism, we take all those classic elements that make Casshan. The slender guy in a white motorcycle outfit with the red C on his chest and 2 guns at his hip, and the high collar. Those are absolutely the trademark elements you have to have in place. And he decides to apply them to this very taut, muscular frame with all of these particularly important details of facial structure.
Yes. Yeah, and that's exactly what he did. He took the original concept and just left it wholly intact, just like, okay, a little tweak here, a little tweak there, a little more detail in this. And you have what is the essence of late 80s, early 90s character designs, this attention to detail.
Absolutely. And it's fantastic to see. You get the impression of an actor as Casshan, as drawn in the Umetsu work. The 70s, the classic Casshan, is very clearly a cartoon. And it's very comfortable with that image. The early 90s Casshan Robot Hunter is a film.
Yeah, it's
an
superhero
animated
Terminator.
film. And it does that extraordinarily well. And it's really one of the few times where we see this hyper detail.
And now he did take some liberties with some of the designs, but it's still like I guess one could possibly criticize some of the liberties he took with Luna's design. But again, it's very typical of its time.
Yeah, that was the look of the time. And it's also kind of interesting because it grew up. Casshan Robot Hunter looks like a grown-up Casshan. Which brings us to another 15 years hence from Casshan Robot Hunter, when we get to the 2008 series Casshan Sins, which we're only referring to as Casshan Sins for the purpose of that's what it's known as. It's still Casshan. It's just one of those romanization things.
Well, it's if you know anything about the Japanese language, they're a little squiffy when it comes to R's.
Yeah.
So it's Casshan or it's Casshan, but in the West it's mostly known as Casshan.
Herlock, Harlock, same story.
Yes.
Lupin, Rupon. There's a lot of idiocy.
Yeah.
But you probably know it best as Casshan Sins. We'll refer to it as Casshan Sins. And this is Yoshihiko Umakoshi,
who did that thing. Well, we know he did Street Fighter Alpha character designs, so
which
that's
good.
Yeah.
But the man was
yeah.
Principally, he was a key animator on a bunch of crap.
Yeah. So I suppose even a blind squirrel finds 2 nuts.
Yes. It's possible that simply because he does all this principal key animation, he doesn't get out of the house much.
Yep.
But this was a good example of him working well, and kind of an entirely different direction from '93.
Yeah, this is like it's kind of a hybrid between the approaches we saw in the previous. It's serious, but it's a cartoony kind of serious look. And you have that very typical 2000 sort of simplified artwork in digital paint.
Right. This is a very elemental Casshan. How little of the elements of the Casshan design can we get away with? Which aids a lot in the very surrealistic animation. The design serves the animation. It serves the movement. A lot of movement, and a lot of camera angle, and a lot of stretching and fisheye lenses. And in order to facilitate that, you can't have a character design where the designer is going to run into the room and say, but if you do that, then I'll have to completely redraw the musculature on the right thigh. Yeah. So the Umakoshi character design works better for what they were trying to do in Casshan Sins. And it's not a bad design in of itself.
No, it works.
Very very attractive design. I'll use the word again, elemental.
Mhm.
You have exactly all you need to recognize the character as Casshan, and nothing more.
Yep.
And all of these got the stuff right that they didn't get right in the live action movie.
I still like the live action movie. It's live action. We're not going to even cover that, but I'll just say live action Casshan. It's very different, but it's good for being what it is.
For what it is, it's great.
But it's not-
very hard to call it Casshan.
Yes, exactly. It's like the late '90s American Godzilla movie. It's a surprisingly good monster movie. It's just a god awful Godzilla movie.
Yes. But as you can see from our 3 examples of this one character, design has changed radically over the years. Much more than just that little snippet of a picture of 2 purple-haired girls could tell you.
Yes.
And every era has a lot to offer. Principally, though, this era right here.
Yes. Mostly the news.
Most of the time.
Stick to that.
We recommend it. Lots of good stuff on tapes. Hey, Mike.
Yes.
What's your favorite thing in the world?
Macross 2.
Hey, Mike.
Yes.
Ignore that question and answer this one.
Okay.
Jake, from somewhere in Ohio,
Ah.
we assume, because he told us so,
Oh. Okay.
asks, Dear Justin and Mike, see, you got it right. Where do you see anime going as an art form in the next 10 years?
So how much should I hold back on this?
Tell you what,
You know what? You know, we'll be professional.
we will be professional.
Okay. In fact, it's quite opportune that we get to ask this question. We were actually discussing this in the car a bit earlier today.
Yes.
The simple answer is down the shitter.
Yes. Anime is in desperate need of new ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this isn't just some strange plea for originality.
No. In fact, this actually goes back to a comment Miyazaki made some time back about, and I quote, the problem with the anime industry is that there are too many otaku in it. Actually, I believe his words were, it's full of otaku.
Yes.
And I quote, "The problem with the anime industry is it's full of otaku. Anime suffers because industry staff is made up of otaku who don't spend time watching real people and are humans who can't stand looking at other humans. So saith Miyazaki."
Right now, anime refers in on itself too much.
Well, it relies on that.
Yes.
And modern anime is not. It's Quentin Tarantino levels of self-referentialness. It's okay, or well, cultural reference anyway.
Yeah. Perfect example. And this was the example that Mike and I actually agreed upon. The deres of characters.
Now, we don't formally acknowledge the existence of these terms, but we're just going to use them for the purpose of this argument.
Right. A modern show will have a tsundere type character who will react in a particular fashion. And if you were to ask the committee that created the show, why does this character behave in this fashion? It's because this character is a tsundere character.
Yeah. And if you ask further, okay, well, I mean, is there any other reason they'd be acting this way? To which I'm sure they'd respond, I don't understand your question.
Yes. The problem is we now rely so heavily on trope and reference and format and template.
Yeah, there's no storytelling. It's really gone back to that section of American superhero comics that I constantly criticize, where it's a lot of stuff happening but no real story. Except this is even worse.
Yes. And anytime we do get something truly genre-defying or truly unusual,
No one watches it.
very few people watch it.
Red line.
As such, anime is retreating back into this super comfort zone
Yeah.
that only feeds the market, that produces the creators that produce what the market wants. And that's spiraling in on itself very
Yeah,
quickly.
anime. So to answer your question, within 10 years, anime is going to, if not having completed the process, be in the process of imploding upon itself.
Yes. It's really ripe again for another change, like we just mentioned, where it consolidates. We're going to get some really tight studio control that's going to absolutely obliterate a lot of the individual voices, but it's also going to take away some of the fringe stuff that's eating away at the quality.
Well, essentially what we need is the anime equivalent of the great video game crash of 1983.
Yes.
Almost everything dies away, people skew away from it, and then 3 years later, Nintendo comes along. We need an anime Nintendo.
Yes. And we need a single galvanizing series or film, another watershed moment to show everyone how good everything can be. Kind of like the show that you're going to recommend this week.
Yes, exactly. So...
You like that segue?
Yeah.
I worked on that one.
Yes. Anyway, so, as I may or may not have mentioned in the past, in the late 90s, what we saw was sort of a lot of divergence going on. We saw anime trying to go in a lot of different directions, and it wasn't quite sure where it wanted to go. A lot of it, the more stuff that was born out of what we had referred to as the cute revolution, is unfortunately a lot of what kind of stuck around. I'm going to talk about one of the dead ends of anime, which is very unfortunate, to be honest.
Yes. This was a sci-fi western with a magnificent soundtrack, amazing Toshihiro Kawamoto character designs, directed by... Well, he's just an esteemed crazy person.
Yes.
Shinichiro Watanabe, the infamous Nabashin.
Yep. We have Cowboy Bebop.
Yes.
Now, I'm not even going to talk about it too much because I think I can say I can't say anything of it that hasn't already been said. So just going to talk about what makes it awesome.
Yes.
If you have not seen this, please do. It's one of the few things from the late 90s that I do hold in very high esteem. This is a rare case of believe the hype.
Yes. There is quite literally nothing to criticize.
Yes. Yeah, some episodes are better than others, but I think I can say with confidence that it does not have a single bad episode.
No. I can offer one perfect piece of recommendation. My father liked Cowboy Bebop. My father's list of anime he likes reads Speed Racer, Space Battleship Yamato, that one with the boobs in it that was kind of funny, Cowboy Bebop.
Yes. Yeah, and it's great. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a sci-fi western with some heavy gangster themes and awesome, largely jazz soundtrack. Composed by Yoko Kanno. You can never go wrong with the Yoko Kanno soundtrack. Heck, that's the one thing Vampire Princess Miyu TV got right.
Hell, that's the one thing Brainpowered got right.
Yep. Or, oh no. Actually, sorry. Miyu is Kenji Kawai, but Kenji Kawai is kind of the other side of Kanno's coin anyway, so...
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
For a moment, we were endorsing Vampire Princess Miyu TV.
You know, I have a quick theory. I think I've just realized that Yoko Kanno and Kenji Kawai are the same person. I think they just tripped in a spring in Jusenkyo.
That was bad, and you should feel bad.
I'm not... Who said I was joking? Anyway. But yes. Very well animated, very well illustrated, lots of heavy detail, very emotional.
Contained.
Yeah, contained. I would have liked a bit more continuity. I mean, there's not any contradictions, but it's, every episode, with a few exceptions, is its own story. But it's just watch it. It's a treat for all of your senses.
Yes. And the film, which released here, was Cowboy Bebop the movie, and released everywhere where they didn't have to worry about upsetting the music rights holders was Knocking on Heaven's Door, is also great.
Yes.
And has some of the best animated fight sequences you will ever see. Really, it's fantastic end to end. The pedigree going into Spike's character, the lead character Spike Spiegel, is intended to be an amalgamation of Lupin III and Captain Harlock. So really, the only way you can beat the character of Spike Spiegel is
Captain
Lupin
Harlock.
III or Captain Harlock.
Yep. And once again, having established that Leiji Matsumoto and Monkey Punch are superior to something else,
we can consider this a point on which to end. We thank you very much for watching. We really enjoyed putting this one together. Thank you, Jake, for your question. And from all of us here at Maison Otaku,
this is Mike.
And Justin saying, enjoy what you watch.
And share what you enjoy.
響けキャシャン叩けキャシャン砕けキャシャン噂に聞こえたすごいやつキックアタック電光パンチ生まれ変わった不死身の体
横顔を見ると思うあなたを好きと思う今世界が終わったって惜しくはないわうるさいシャイな憂鬱ノイズの向こう側に耳を澄ませば愛がこんなに近く2億年前のように静かだねああ言葉なんて何もいらないから二人が一人で生まれてきたこと忘れるくらいに背中を抱いて目まぐるしい時間の胸が走り抜ける街はサバンナぼやくように抜け出すようにこの力を試してみたくてきっとどこかに答えある生まれてきた答えが人は皆それを求めやるせない逃がせない夢に向かう世界も全て同じらしくのちって命は育てるどんな正義を隠しても流れ出るし気持ちを止められはしない
down the shitter.
With a rake.
God.